All right, let's dive into one of the most brilliant and complicated periods in all of history, the Golden Age of Athens. We're talking about a time of unbelievable art, philosophy, and the birth of democracy. And at the center of it all was one man, Pericles. But here's the big question we're going to tackle. Was all that glory worth the price?
I mean, just look at this. In the 5th century BC, Athens was, without a doubt, the place to be. Under Pericles, you had geniuses like Socrates walking the streets, you had playwrights like Sophocles changing theater forever, and you had buildings like the Parthenon going up on the Acropolis. It was the ultimate symbol of Athenian power and its democratic ideals. Even though, that democracy was pretty limited, it didn't include women, or slaves, or foreigners.
But here's the catch. This golden age, all this art and democracy, it wasn't just paid for by the good citizens of Athens. Oh no. It was bankrolled by the treasury of what was, for all intents and purposes, an Athenian empire. And that right there is where the story gets really interesting. To really understand this, to get to the bottom of this contradiction, you have to understand the man himself, the guy who was so dominant, who so completely shaped the city that we still call this entire period the Age of Pericles. For more than 30 years, from 461 all the way to 429 BC, Pericles was the guy in Athens. The historian Thucydides, who was actually there, didn't call him a king or a tyrant. He called him the first citizen. That's how powerful his influence was. He led Athens to its greatest heights and, as we'll see, into its darkest days.
So, how did he do it? How did one man get so much power in a democracy? Well, let's start by looking at the case for Pericles, the man who made his name as the champion of the common people, the demos.
What Pericles did was pretty revolutionary for the time. See, before him, being involved in politics was basically a hobby for the rich. You couldn't afford to take time off work. But Pericles changed all that. He started paying citizens for jury duty, he even had the state cover theater tickets for the poor, and he lowered the property requirements for holding office. All of this meant that for the first time ever, the lower classes had real, actual power in their own government. It was a game changer.
But as you can imagine, not everyone was a fan. His critics, and that includes the famous philosopher Plato, thought these policies were a complete disaster. They basically said that by paying people for what should be their civic duty, Pericles was corrupting them. Plato's take was that he turned hardworking people into lazy, greedy citizens who just depended on the state for handouts.
And speaking of handouts, those public payments, not to mention those massive, expensive building projects, they had to be paid for somehow. This brings us to the shadiest part of his story, the money. Where did Pericles get the cash? The answer lies in an alliance that he twisted into an empire. So it all started with a group called the Delian League. It was formed after the wars with Persia, and the idea was simple. All these Greek city-states would team up for mutual defense. Everyone would chip in either ships or money, which they called tribute, to a shared treasury on the island of Delos. It was supposed to be a partnership of equals. But under Pericles, that partnership went right out the window. Step 1, Athens started pressuring its allies to just pay them cash instead of sending their own ships. This gave Athens a monopoly on military power. Then came the big move, Step 2. In 454 BC, they literally moved the entire treasury from the neutral island of Delos to Athens. And once the money was in their city, well, Step 3 was inevitable. Athens started using the funds however it wanted and would crush any ally that even thought about leaving the league. And what did Pericles want to do with all that money? He proposed using 9,000 talents from the league's treasury to rebuild Athens. Now, to put that number in perspective, a single talent was enough to pay a warship's crew for a month. We are talking about an absolutely insane amount of money, enough to fund a massive war for years. And he wanted to spend it all on temples for his city. I mean, let that sink in. Using money that was meant for mutual defense to glorify your own city, it's been called one of the biggest embezzlements in history. It means that some of the most stunning, most important works of art ever created were paid for by force and domination. Well, you can't go around building an empire and stealing your allies' money without making some enemies. This aggressive behavior put Athens on a direct collision course with its biggest rival, the ultimate military state, Sparta. And the result was the devastating Peloponnesian War. And everything just unraveled so quickly.
In 432 BC, Pericles issues this harsh trade embargo, the Megarian Decree, which was really the last straw for Sparta's allies. The next year, war breaks out. Pericles' big strategy? Pull everyone from the countryside inside the city's massive walls. But this plan backfired horribly. The city became dangerously overcrowded, and in 430 BC, a terrifying plague broke out, wiping out maybe a third of the population. Just 1 year later, Pericles himself, after losing his own sons, caught the plague and died.
So what are we to make of this guy? A leader who built up democracy for his own people, but built an empire on the backs of others? A man whose vision created a cultural paradise, but also led directly to a catastrophic war. Let's hear the final arguments from the people who were actually there.
So on one side, you have the historian Thucydides. He saw Pericles as the ideal leader. He argued that Pericles was so smart and so respected that he didn't just follow public opinion, he guided it for the good of the city. For Thucydides, Athens was a democracy in name, but in reality, it was ruled by its best and wisest citizen. But on the other side, you have Plato, who saw Pericles as a populist who totally corrupted the people, making them greedy and lazy with his state pay.
And that leaves us with the big, messy question that's at the heart of his legacy. When you look at the Parthenon today, what do you see? Is it a monument to the genius of democracy? Or is it a beautiful building paid for with the stolen funds of a subjugated empire? Was the glory worth the price? That's a question that even now history hasn't quite decided on.